Welcome back to On the Move with Victor Shi. This is Victor Shi. It's June 1st, which means it is officially Pride Month. This is a month when all of us, no matter our gender orientation or political background, should stand with the LGBTQ plus community. But right now, we're living in a moment where even as we enter Pride Month, we're seeing increased hate against the LGBTQ plus community more than ever before. We are seeing a community that simply wants to love come under attack, especially in Republican states and counties. We are seeing a community that simply wants to be human and free, have their rights stripped away from them, and none of us should tolerate this. Joining me to discuss this increased hate against the LGBTQ plus community is Chasten Buttigieg, who you may know as Pete Buttigieg's husband, but more importantly, he is an activist for the LGBTQ plus community and the author of the brand new book, I Have Something to Tell You, which is now available wherever you find your books. Chasten, it is so great to have you on. Thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Hey, Victor, good to see you. Thanks for having me and happy Pride.
Of course. So I want to start by talking about kind of what we're seeing in states across the country as it pertains to the LGBTQ plus community, because we're now nearly 8 years since Obergefell v. Hodges was decided, yet we're still seeing increasingly anti-LGBTQ plus legislation, some of which literally is aimed to unroll, or I guess roll back some of those things that were decided in Obergefell v. Hodges. And I'm wondering, just on a personal level, what do you make of what we're seeing right now in states across the country?
Well, I just finished a huge chunk of my book tour, and that allowed me
Yeah.
to sort of pinball all around the country. And one thing that I'm feeling, that I'm sensing from our community is just the exhaustion. People are so exhausted, especially in places like Texas, Missouri, Utah, Florida. When I was there, hearing from people about
Yeah.
just what it is, what it feels like to be on the ground, especially in a state where, the adults in the room, the elected officials have decided that attacking vulnerable people is worth more to them than doing any of the real work that helps protect people's lives, or, makes people's lives safer and better. But then I also see the joy. There are so many good people doing valuable work on the ground, rolling up their sleeves and not focusing, on the culture wars. They're just focusing on keeping people alive, keeping people happy. So much
Yeah.
of what is needed right now is just our joy, queer joy, reminding people that we're part of the majority. The American people are on our side. Even a large majority of our friends on the other side of the aisle, their party believes in supporting LGBTQ rights. And so I am seeing that exhaustion in the community, which is a call to action. There's a season of active allyship supporting the community, but it's also a reminder that our joy and our existence is, in itself a version of resistance. And I want to remind people of that. Don't let people take that away from you. Your joy is so valuable and needed.
I want to talk more about your book and your book tour a little bit later, but you mentioned the fact that you just kind of finished this nationwide book tour and you spent a lot of time interacting with people. And I'm wondering, as you're kind of hearing stories from the LGBTQ plus community, what have you been hearing in terms of kind of what Republicans are doing? Does anyone truly think that this type of behavior that we're seeing is reflective of the country that we all want to live in?
No, no. And the thing is, especially for the people on the ground, excuse me, in those states, it is mind-boggling to watch those people in elected office focus on these issues, that they have
Yeah,
decided that
yeah.
rather than doing the real work, they just want to focus on this stuff because they've admitted it. They threw everything at the wall. They saw what would stick. It's attacking LGBTQ people. And
Hmm.
so it's
Hmm.
easier for them to talk about M&Ms and beer bottles and drag
Yeah.
queens, and paint teachers and families and young kids as the number one enemy of the American people right now because it requires no work. That's the thing. And I
Mhm.
want to believe that they all don't believe it. It's just easy enough for them. But that doesn't
Yeah.
give them a pass because they've allowed their party to just be strangled by this culture war nonsense. That this is what they want to focus on rather than doing anything to protect people's lives, especially when you talk about young people. The
Yeah.
party of family values, talking about protecting young people, will not lift a finger on gun violence, but they will continuously, day in and day out, go after teachers and families and young vulnerable people. It just shows you what a gross imbalance of priority they're experiencing right now.
I mean, where do you think they're trying to go with all of this? What is, if you can even imagine, I mean, the end goal with this, if there even is one?
Well, I think for some of them, it truly is the eradication of LGBTQ people. Some of them have admitted that. Some of the worst corners of social media and the internet, people of very conservative viewpoints have admitted this, right? The point is to push people back into the closet. The point is to get rid of LGBTQ people. So, even the existence of our families, look at places like Florida, where they're trying to make sure that teachers can't even talk about, the fact that they might have a husband or a wife. But the other thing is, they don't have a lot to offer. And so much of my experience in politics is about what you have to offer people. How do you inspire people to be bigger hearted, more inclusive, to draw people in, to make people feel like they are part of something bigger than themselves? I feel like that's the idea of the American experiment, right? And so when you look at what they're talking about day in and day out, it's not about what they're for or who they're for. It's about what they're against, And right now, just turn on the television or look online, and they're just against everything. They're against the Dolly Parton, Miley Cyrus song. They're against the green M&M. They're against beer bottles. They're against drag queens. They're against family. It's just, they don't have a lot to offer the American people, also in terms of solutions to real world problems. So it's much easier for them to fall back on culture wars.
I mean, I don't know what it says about our country that we have more people concerned about what Target displays on their Pride Month kind of selection kind of aisle, or beer companies supporting the LGBTQ plus community. But I think recently, especially with Target, there is this question of, how do you hope companies respond to what we're seeing? Because I think corporations, companies, workplaces have such an important role. Pride Month is this month. What do you hope that companies will do against this moment of just increasing vitriol and hate and kind of targeting of just anything LGBTQ plus related?
I don't think it's a reflection of the country, because the data actually shows that the country's with us. Majority of Americans are just exhausted with this. That this is what representatives and elected officials have chosen to focus on. The fact that they were chosen, they were voted into office to go to Washington and make our lives easier and safer and better, so that we didn't have to focus on all of those things. But that's the idea of having a representative in government. And so the American people actually support LGBTQ rights, more than they ever have in history. Even more Republicans support LGBTQ rights than any moment in history. This is just a very, very vocal minority. And unfortunately, some of that vocal minority, they have the gavels and the microphones right now. And, we live in this sort of media ecosystem that rewards bad behavior. And so you see a couple people going into Target acting a fool, and you start to think that that is representative of millions of people, when in fact it's just a bunch of knuckleheads in Target. I hope that corporations like Target start to show up a little bit more for their employees, not only for the LGBTQ community. I think they need to make it right by the community by acknowledging that they're not going to reward terrorists. They're actually going to keep standing up for diversity and equality and the LGBTQ community, and putting the safety of their employees first. But this isn't a time to just cave into a couple loudmouth people. Safety always comes first, and I understand that. Whether it's deciding whether you want to come out or whether you're going to support your employees, you should always be thinking about safety first. But I don't think we compromise our stance on equality because a couple people have, decided that making bomb threats to Target is valuable use of their time. I think the majority of Americans are exhausted with this, and Target and other corporations should know that actually the majority of Americans stand with them and want to move beyond the nonsense.
Yeah, no, we should not tolerate this. I want to switch to your book because it is such an amazing book. You have it right behind you, and I have it right here. There's a great cartoon of you, and it's a great rendition. I want to ask you about this because, it's a new, well, so technically, walk us through this. It's a new book, but it's adapted specifically for young adults. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I completely rewrote this one. I had a lot more time to work on this. This is the book I wish I could travel back in time and hand my 8th grade self. It is written for young adults, but I do hope that teachers and parents and adults will read it as well, if you want to empathize and understand what a young person might be going through, especially as they navigate identity and coming out in a country that still in many places might not be ready for them. There's a lot in there, just about internalized homophobia, bullying, identity, discovering yourself, and also learning to love yourself.
There's so many, like you said, personal and poignant stories in this book that it would probably take us days to get through. But I want to ask you about your childhood specifically, because you grew up in a family and in an area that really didn't accept people who look like you, people whose identities were like you. And so I'm wondering, kind of, how did you wrestle with that and end up finding your voice and the courage to come out when you did?
So much of what I've been talking about in the book tour is this idea of allyship, active allyship, that you have to earn the title of ally. You can't just give it to
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I'm so grateful for in my life is the fact that after I ran away from home, my parents called me back.
Hmm.
And not everybody has that. And
Yeah.
I appreciate the opportunity to share their story, because you're right, where I was growing up, as a 4-H kid, religious conservative place, the world wasn't ready for gay people. We didn't talk about gay people. But my parents put the health and safety of their kid over, the fears and the opinions of other people. And I'm so, so grateful that my story, had that rainbow at the end, pun intended.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
but so much of that story is about how other people kept me alive. As a young
Mhm.
person, I didn't see a path forward for myself a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was good friends, good allies, good parents, people that helped me learn to love myself and see the value in being different and creative and goofy. And I had all this energy and I just didn't know what to do with myself, and it felt like the world just wasn't ready for me.
Yeah.
um, and I hope that other parents and teachers are heartened by some of those stories, and it reminds them of how important their words and their actions are. That it starts with, small conversations at home. Like, I could have benefited from a 10-second conversation with my parents, and they sat me down and just said,
Mhm.
we love you unconditionally, gay, straight, bi, trans, whoever you are, whether you're a football player or a dancer. We will love you unconditionally. You always have a roof over your head and two parents who love you. And so there are a lot of conversations in this book about what we can do to be better allies to ourselves and to people in our community.
Yeah, I mean, I want to ask you more about that because one of the major things that I took away from this novel is that so much of acceptance is uniquely tied to community and the people around you, your teachers, parents, like you said, your friends. Talk more about kind of what you hope people will take away about how they can become a better ally, especially now. How can we create a world that is more accepting and a community for those who do come out?
Yeah, so two things. This Pride Month is always for me an opportunity to think about my call to action as an advocate and as an
Yeah.
ally. What am I doing? Am I doing enough? And we can all ask ourselves what we're doing with our time, our money, and our privilege. So I have a lot of privilege in this world to be the person with the microphone and the platform, and I always want to make sure that I'm getting it right. Part of that, especially now, is having conversations with people about supporting the trans community, because many people in
Yeah.
our LGBTQ community, our ever growing acronym, maybe have never met a trans person or don't understand what it is like to be a trans American. And so that is one thing that I'm always thinking about as I'm traveling the country, meeting with people. How do you use your platform, use it right, and lift up other people's voices?
Yeah.
And then Pride Month is also just a celebration of our existence. That young, scared, closeted kid in Northern Michigan probably never thought that this is what his life was going to be like. And so right now, it's important to remind everyone in the community that it is okay to be joyful.
Yeah.
Please be yourself and do not let them rob you of that. Whether you're, a same-sex couple, like my husband and I, we go to the grocery store or the
Yeah.
playground, and there's that tendency to look over your shoulder and wonder if people are, watching you because you're a same-sex family. Do not let people make you second guess your existence
Yeah.
in this world. And it is okay to be yourself. I think there are many people who want to force us back into the closet and to make us fearful of our own existence. And so pride, for me, it's those two things. Celebrate your existence and that joy and the fact that you made it and you're still here. And that, holy cow, I got to grow up and be this person.
Yeah.
And two, think about the ways in which you're using your money, your time, your privilege. And a lot of people, especially our allies, need to think about whether or not they have earned that title. Especially a
Yes.
year like this year, there are a lot of people who need your resources or your time. And so find a way to make sure that at the end of the day that you have earned that title and you haven't just given it to yourself.
Yes, no, that is so important, especially now. And we mentioned the word joy a couple of times throughout this episode, and I want to end by talking more about joy because you've had just such a storied and illustrative kind of journey, being on the presidential campaign trail to now, where you're seeing, I mean, Mike Pence come after you and your family, and just Republicans coming after you. How do you personally maintain that level of joy, and what do you have to say to young people who are kind of living in this world where, like you said, there is so much of that like hate and vitriol? How do
Yeah.
people maintain that positivity and joy?
I know sometimes it sounds like baloney when people say it gets better. And I remember hearing that as a young person and thinking that it was baloney too,
Mhm.
because there were many days where I just, I didn't have any friends or role models, and I wasn't living in a world that felt ready for me.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of times where I thought I wasn't going to make it. but I did. And I love my life. I love being a dad. I never thought that I would get to be married one day or be a father one day or get the opportunity to, write a book that I wish I would have had when I was younger. And the fact that I'm here just reminds me of what matters. When the internet seems loud and the politics seems silly, I shut the phone off and I get on the floor and I play with my kids because they keep me grounded. They remind me of what matters. And the thing that I want young people to know and all LGBTQ people to know is that you get to decide how much weight their words are worth.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I see that negativity when those attacks happen and that negativity creeps into my social media timeline.
Yeah.
I just have to pause and reflect on how happy I am and how miserable they are. Don't let them rob you of that joy.
And it says so much more about them than it says about us. And thank you for everything that you are doing, Chasten. Thank you for writing this important book. Where can everyone kind of find your book? Or tell us what's maybe even next for you. What's in store for you?
Yeah, folks can visit bookshop.org to find the book through their local independent bookseller. And my website, chastenwrites.com, we're also collecting donated books for national LGBTQ nonprofits so that if cost is a barrier to any nonprofit program, teacher, or student, that we can hopefully send out some books so other people can reach them. For me, I'm just going to keep celebrating Pride this month. Got a couple more book events. You folks can find that on my website and just keep going, telling our stories and sharing other people's stories as well.
Definitely. Chasten, thank you so much for spending time with me this morning. And thank you again for all that you do.
Thanks, Victor. Great to see you. Happy Pride.
Thanks so much. Happy Pride.
See ya.
Well, that was an inspiring episode with Chasten Buttigieg. Again, if you haven't checked out his book, check it out. It is called I Have Something to Tell You for Young Adults, a memoir. It is a great cover. You have Chasten right there and wonderful, wonderful cover. And it's a very, very digestible read, very suitable for all audiences and such an important read, like we said, especially now when you have so much of this community of the LGBTQ plus community coming under attack against, the backdrop of Republican states across the country trying to roll back rights, trying to make it harder for them simply to be human, and none of us should tolerate it. So thank you, Chasten, for coming on, and please check out his book. Just one quick thing before we end today. I know a lot of people have been concerned about the debt ceiling. There's default. Yesterday, we talked about it with Ali Velshi. We've talked about it on this show a few times, but there is good news. The House has voted to increase the debt ceiling, which means that we are officially not going to default, or hopefully the Senate passes it. But as of now, it's past a key hurdle in the House. It's moved on from the House. And one of the things that I thought was fascinating from yesterday wasn't the fact that it was passed. I mean, I actually probably expected that it would pass. But what's more interesting is the vote differences between Republicans and Democrats. More Democrats actually ended up voting to increase the debt ceiling than Republicans did, according to the final tally, which was 149 Republicans voted yes, whereas 165 Democrats voted yes. And it's, I think, a really kind of startling statistic to me in the sense that, Democrats aren't even the majority, but yet they still have more votes to increase this debt ceiling than Republicans and Kevin McCarthy, who is the Speaker of the House, who controls his caucus, but can't get enough of his caucus to vote for this bill. He has to rely on Democrats to do so. And we saw that earlier too. There was a previous vote, and he had to rely on 29 Democrats to vote for the rule in order to advance this bill into the next stage, which is this kind of final vote. But more than ever before, I think you're seeing this chasm within this Republican Party. You only have 149 Republicans voting yes, which is, again, like we say, a Republican Party that's in disarray, whereas Democrats are united. They are together. They are joining forces, and they're voting for this bill because they understand at the end of the day, default is so much worse than not passing this debt ceiling increase. So I think it's another embarrassing spectacle for Kevin McCarthy in terms of just his weakness as Speaker. But I think for all of us kind of watching this entire process play out, we should all keep in mind just kind of, would you rather have a party that is really more united, or a party that's like Kevin McCarthy and the Republican Party, where they just don't seem to be getting their act together, and that more of them are in disarray than ever before? And we'll see whether or not Kevin McCarthy survives the speakership, but it'll be interesting to see what happens. But at least as of now, we can have a sigh of relief and look forward to a day where we don't have to worry about defaulting and economic catastrophes. So good news for President Biden. I think this is not perfect. We never said it was perfect, but it is, I think, good news for President Biden in terms of just avoiding default, getting what he wants, at least some of what he wants. There were some concessions made, but that's unfortunately, like you said, the art of negotiation. And if you want to see, these things not be conceded, vote in 2024. Vote for a Democratic Congress, a Democratic Senate and House. Make sure you get out there and vote, because we never want to see a repeat of this happen again. And we want to see things like, not expanded work requirements. We want to see expanded programs for veterans, for students, for working families. And that only happens if we have the majority, because Republicans clearly are not committed to that. So 2024, that is our moment to all make sure that we do our part and turn out and vote, because we never want to be in this moment again. But thank you everyone for watching this episode of On the Move with myself and Chasten Buttigieg today. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode with Representative Daniel Goldman, who I'm sure all of you know from his work previously on the first impeachment trial, but also as an MSNBC legal analyst and now as a representative who is really on fire. And I'm going to talk to him about everything from his work on committees to the Oversight Committee to the House Weaponization of Government Subcommittee, and kind of everything going on there, and what the Democratic response is, and then how Democrats are still introducing sane legislation and still trying to work across the aisle, and what we should make of all of this. It'll be an exciting episode. Join us tomorrow right here on youtube.com/Politicon or on Twitter at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern. We'll be live. We'll be with Representative Daniel Goldman. And thank you all so much for watching this episode, and I will see you all tomorrow.